Hello, good morning. This is Ana Dominguez, your language coach. And today we are going to continue reading chapter 4, Burdens of the novel Little Women. I'm going to explain that we have two different readings. The novel that I'm reading here with you alone, and I'm showing you the chapter and the text with the highlighted words or expressions. And then we are also reading the script from 1994 with people that are supporting our project of English through theater. Those are different texts from the Little Women. So one is the original text, which is this one, and the other is a version for the big screen, which is a movie that was made in 1994. I want you to enjoy, especially this chapter 4 from the novel, where we have to consider that it's called Burdens. It's called like that. And I just place the picture of Joe being in Aunt March's house, where you can see Aunt March on that in that armchair. And this is something that happens usually, is that Joe goes to her house and read out loud books that Aunt March want to hear. And I don't want to comment every expression. I might say something, but not all of them, because otherwise this will be very long. But it's interesting to clarify that burdens is the word that it is used in the Pilgrim's Progress, is what Christian, the main character, is carrying. It's like the backpack, we could say. But these burdens is the topic of this chapter, because all of them, as if they were little pilgrims, they have their own burdens. And this chapter is talking mainly about that. Of all the characters, we are going to see their limitations and their worries, okay? So let's start with this, and having in mind that reference, the Pilgrim's Progress, because it's essential to understand Little Women. Oh dear, how hard it does seem to take up our packs and go on, sighed Meg, to the morning after the party. For now the holidays were over. The week of merrymaking did not fit her for going uneasy with the tax she never liked. I wish it was Christmas or New Year's all the time. Wouldn't it be fun? Answered Joe, yawning dismally. We shouldn't enjoy ourselves half so much as we do now, but it does seem so nice to have little suppers and bouquets, and go to parties and drive home and read and rest and not work. It's like other people, you know, and I always envy girls who do such things. I'm so fond of luxury, said Meg, trying to decide which of the two shabby gowns was the least shabby. Well, we can't have it, so don't let us grumble, but shoulder our bundles and trudge along as cheerfully as Marmee does. And here is a reference, direct reference to the Pilgrim's Progress, with each of them with their own burdens, okay? I'm sure Aunt March is a regular old man of the sea to me, but I suppose when I've learned to carry her without complaining, again, the same reference, she will tumble off. Tumble off is Christian, in the character of the Pilgrim's Progress. There is a moment where he is being liberated from that heavy burden. So that's a mention. That's what she's mentioning here. She will tumble off or get so light that I shan't mind her. Very interesting, okay? So that's why it's essential that if it's possible, read the Pilgrim's Progress. I showed you before the book, to understand Little Women. This idea tickled Joe's fancy and put her in good spirits. But Meg didn't brighten, for her burden, consisting of 4 spoiled children, seemed heavier than ever. So now we understand what is the burden of Meg. That she has to take care of these spoiled children, right? She had not heart enough even to make herself pretty as usual by putting on a blue neck ribbon and dressing her hair in the most becoming way. Where's the use of looking nice when no one sees me but those cross midgets, and no one cares whether I'm pretty or not? She muttered, shutting her drawer with a jerk. I shall have to toil and moil all my days, with only little bits of fun now and then, and get old and ugly, and this is an interesting word that's we usually pronounce wrong, sour, okay? Because I'm poor and can't enjoy my life as other girls do. It's a shame. Yes. So Meg went down wearing an injured look and wasn't at all agreeable at breakfast time. Everyone seemed rather out of sorts and inclined to, and this is another interesting word, which is croak, okay? And it's like complain, croak, and the sound looks like the sound of the frogs, right? So that's making those noise of complaining about things. Beth had a headache and lay on the sofa trying to comfort herself with the cat and 3 kittens. Amy was fretting because her lessons were not learned and she couldn't find her rubbers. Joe would whistle and make a great racket getting ready. So making a lot of noise, I think, is that. And yes, whistling and moving around things. Mrs. March was very busy trying to finish a letter. And this is also interesting. She's writing a letter probably to the father, okay? And this is something that actually I would probably use also for the adaptation of our version on stage. Is her letters are going to tell a lot of things to summarize and make this beautiful novel into 1 hour theater play on stage. So I keep reading. It says, so Mrs. March was very busy trying to finish a letter, which must go at once. And Hannah had the grams for being up late didn't suit her. Hannah, remember, is the freed woman that is living with them. Very interesting character and very important in the novel as well. There never was such a cross family, cried Jo, losing her temper when she had upset an instant, broken both boot lacings, and sat down upon her hat. So what happened there is that it was chaotic. Okay, so upset an instant is that she probably have just bumped into the desk, for example, and the inkstand moved, so probably spilled some ink around, broken both boot lacings. So when she was trying to tie her boots, the laces broke, and sat down upon her hat. You are the closest person in need, returned Amy, washing out the sum that was all wrong with the tears that had fallen on her slate. And the slate, remember, is this kind of, it's a kind of blackboard that they had to do their homework. Beth, if you don't keep these horrid cats down cellar, and the cellar, remember, is, we could say it's like the basement, we could say, or in even the lo que llamamos nosotros la bodega, I'll have them drawn, exclaimed Meg angrily, as she tried to get rid of the kitten, which had scrambled up her back and stuck like a bear just out of reach. Jo laughed, and by the way, I want to comment here that the other day I was trying to see the difference between laughed in US accent, laughed, and British accent. They, at least in word reference, if you go there and you try and see the differences in the phonetic symbols, but also in the sound, you will see that in British it's said laughed, not with a. So Jo laughed in American, or laughed in British. Meg scolded, Beth implored, and Amy wailed because she couldn't remember how much 9 times 12 was. Girls, do be quiet 1 minute. I must get this off by the early mail, and you drive me distracted with your worry, cried Mrs. March, crossing out the third spoiled sentence in her letter. There was a momentary lull broken by Hannah, who stalked in, laid 2 hot turnovers on the table, and stalked out again. These turnovers were an institution, and the girls called them muffs, for they had no others and found the hot pies very comforting to their hands and cold mornings. So this is something sweet that Hannah is preparing them every morning, and it's hot, so it's like a cake, we could say. Hannah never forgot to make them, no matter how busy or grumpy she might be, for the walk was long and bleak. And this is interesting, the constant work of Hannah, no matter how busy or grumpy she might be. She always offered them these turnovers, knowing that the long way, that they were going to walk for a long in the morning. The poor things got no other lunch and were seldom home before 2. So again, it's interesting. And some of them, Amy is going to the school. Beth is probably staying at home, as we will understand later. And Joe and Meg are going to work. They do things, they help, or Marmee, or in this case, we know that Meg is going to take care of kids, but we also know that Meg is working as a nurse, I think. You will find out later. Cuddle your cats and get over your headache, Bethy. Goodbye, Marmee. We are a set of rascals this morning. Yes, and this is probably some of them. I think is Joe talking. Cuddle your cats and get over your headache, Bethy. Goodbye, Marmee. We are a set of rascals this morning, but we'll come home regular angels. Now then, Meg and Joe tramped away, feeling that the pilgrims were not setting out as they ought to do. They always looked back before turning the corner, for their mother was always at the window to nod and smile and wave her hand to them. And I have to say that at least in my family, we do this a lot, especially women in my family. Somehow, it seemed as if they couldn't have got through the day without that. For whatever their mood might be, the last glimpse of that motherly face was sure to affect them like sunshine. If Marmee shook her fist instead of kissing her hand to us, it would serve us right, for more ungrateful wretches than we are were never seen, cried Joe, taking a remorseful satisfaction in the snowy walk and bitter wind. Don't use such dreadful expressions, replied Meg, from the depths of the veil in which she had shrouded herself like a nun sick of the world. This is interesting, that like a nun sick of the world. Remember that she was saying, well, what's the use of going pretty? And she's using this veil, typical from Victorian times. I like good, strong words. That means something, replied Joe, catching her hat as it looked a leap off her head, preparatory to flying away altogether. Call yourself any names you like, but I'm neither a rascal nor a wretch, and I don't choose to be called so. You are a blighted being, and decidedly cross today because you can't sit in the lap of luxury all the time. Poor dear, just wait till I make my fortune, and you shall revel revel in carriages and ice cream and high-heeled slippers and poses. I think so, and poses, and this is a kind of flower, I think, poses, and red-headed boys to dance with. How ridiculous you are, Joe. But Meg laughed at the nonsense and felt better in spite of herself. Lucky for you I am, for it I put on crushed airs and tried to be dismal. As you do, we should be in a nice state. Thank goodness I can always find something funny to keep me up. Don't croak anymore. But come home jolly. There is a dear. Jo gave her sister an encouraging pat on the shoulder as they parted for the day, each going a different way, each hugging her little warm turnover, and each trying to be cheerful in spite of wintry weather, hard work, and the unsatisfied desires of pleasure-loving youth. When Mr. March, the father, lost his property in trying to help an unfortunate friend, and this is interesting, we know that they have become poor from the very beginning. We know that they are suffering, and that's why Meg is also wishing to come back to those times where they were rich, is because of this. The father was trying to help a friend, and he lost his fortune. The two oldest girls begged to be allowed to do something toward their own support, at least, believing that they could not begin too early to cultivate energy, industry, and independence. Their parents consented, and both fell to work with the hearty goodwill, which, in spite of all obstacles, ensured to succeed at last. Margaret, so Meg, found a place, and now we are going to find the description of the four of Little Women. We start with the eldest. Margaret found a place as nursery governess and felt, so nursery governess, I guess that nursery school is also for little boys. So I guess that's what she's doing. Taking care of little kids, and felt rich with her small salary. As she said, she was fond of luxury, and her chief trouble was poverty. She found it harder to bear than the others because she could remember a time when home was beautiful, life full of ease and pleasure, and want of any kind unknown. She tried not to be envious or discontented, but it was very natural that the young girl should long for pretty things, gay friends, accomplishments, and a happy life. At the King's, she daily saw all she wanted, for the children's older sisters were just out, and Meg caught frequent glimpses of dainty ball dresses and bouquets. Her lively gossip about theaters, and I want to emphasize here that theater is being spelled here as in American style, with the R after the E. Concerts, sleighing parties, I don't know if I have pronounced that right, and merrymakings of all kinds, and so money lavished, so lavish is como despilfarrado, ¿vale? Lavish on trifles, and trifles are little things for you to feel good. Could be pequeños lujos, vamos a decir, ¿no? Little trifles, which would have been so precious to her. Poor Meg seldom complained, but a sense of injustice made her feel bitter toward anyone sometimes, for she had not yet learned to know, and this is also nice to hear this from Louisa May Alcott writing this, she had not yet learned to know how rich she was in the blessings which alone can make life happy. Jo happened and now it's Joe. Joe happened to suit Aunt March, who was lame and needed an active person to wait upon her. The childless old lady had offered to adopt one of the girls, and we know that Aunt March didn't get married, and that now they are telling us that she, in moments of trouble, when they lost their money, she offered to adopt one of the girls when the troubles came, and was much offended because her offer was declined. Other friends told the Marches that they had lost all chance of being remembered in the rich old lady's will, but the unworldly Marches only said, we can't give up our girls for a dozen fortunes. Rich or poor, we will keep together and be happy in one another. The old lady wouldn't speak to them for a time, but happening to meet Joe at a friend's, something in her comical face and blunt manners struck the old lady's fancy, and she proposed to take her for a companion. This did not suit Joe at all, but she accepted the place since nothing better appeared, and to everyone's surprise, got on remarkably well with her irascible relative. So now we know where is Joe going. She's going to Aunt March's house to read out loud to her and accompany her. That's her job, we could say. There was an occasional tempest, and once Joe marched home, declaring she couldn't bear it longer, but Aunt March always cleared up quickly and sent for her to come back again with such urgency that she could not refuse, for in her heart she rather liked the peppery old lady. I suspect that the real attraction was a large library of fine books. So one of the things that the Aunt March has is a beautiful library where obviously Joe is not only reading out loud to her, but also finding books that she can read. So we are going to find this in this moment. I suspect that the real attraction was a large library of fine books. And this, I suspect, is Luisa May Alcott talking about that, which was left to dust and spiders since Uncle March died. And Uncle March is el tío. So remember, this Aunt March is the aunt of the father, and Uncle March probably also was the uncle of the father, but it's not the husband, sorry, of Aunt March, okay? As it's being mentioned here. Since Uncle March died, Joe remembered the kind old gentleman who used to let her build railroads and bridges with his big dictionaries, tell her stories about queer pictures in his Latin books, and buy her cards of gingerbread whenever he met her in the street. The dim, dusty room with the busts staring down from the tall bookcases, the cozy chairs, the globes, these spheres of the earth, and best of all, the wilderness of books in which she could wander where she liked, made the library a region of bliss to her. The moment Aunt March took her nap or was busy with company, Jo hurried to this quiet place and, curling herself up in the easy chair, devoured poetry, romance, history, travels, and pictures like a regular bookworm. Okay, don't confuse worm with, we need to pronounce the R, and the O is like a E, like when you say bird or word. Okay, so worm, and don't confuse it with warm, which is caliente, ¿vale? But like all happiness, it did not last long, for as sure as she had just reached the heart of the story, the sweetest verse of a song, or the most perilous adventure of her traveler, a shrill voice called Josephine or Josephine, Josephine, and she had to leave her paradise to win yarn, which is the wool that they are using probably to do the knitting, was the poodle, which is the little dog, Canice, or read Beauchamp's essays by the hour together. And probably I will place over here Beauchamp's essays for you to see the books. Jo's ambition was to do something very splendid. What it was, she had no idea as yet, but left it for time to tell her, and meanwhile found her greatest affliction in the fact that she couldn't read, run, and ride as much as she liked. A quick temper, sharp tongue, and restless spirit were always getting her into scrapes, which means troubles, basically. And her life was a series of ups and downs, which were both comic and pathetic. Very interesting. This is fire. Jo represent fire, remember? But the training she received at Aunt March's was just what she needed. And the thought that she was doing something to support herself made her happy in spite of the perpetual Josephine. Beth was too bashful, so which means shy, to go to school. And now we are going to understand Beth, air element. Remember, Meg, earth, Jo, fire, Beth, air element. Beth was too bashful, so which means shy, to go to school. It had been tried, but she suffered so much. So se intentó, se había intentado ya, but she suffered so much that it was given up. And she did her lessons at home with her father. We know now that father was also teaching Beth when he was at home. Now he is in the Civil War as maybe as a priest that is helping people there, because we know that he's a religious man. And we know that because it has been said in many occasions, and probably also because of the context. Let's put the context of the Pilgrim's Progress, right? And that he is also marching. This pilgrim is marching to Celestial City, from the city of destruction to Celestial City. And we know as a myth, we understand that also the people that were fighting for the rights of Black people in United States and freed them from slavery were people with this spirit, like the father, and like Christian in the Pilgrim's Progress. And this is interesting because the second part of Pilgrim's Progress is going to be the mother with the children going after the father to find him in the Celestial City. Okay, so this is the myth that is being told in Pilgrim's Progress, and that we can see some reflection on that of that story here in this novel of Louisa May Alcott, that is talking about her own situation in historical situation and context there in America. Let's keep going. Even when he went away and her mother was called to devote her skill and energy to soldiers' aid societies, so the mother is also helping these soldiers, and Beth went faithfully on by herself and did the best she could. She was a housewifely little creature and helped Hannah keep home neat and comfortable. Comfortable is another word that usually we pronounce wrong, for the workers, never thinking of any reward but to be loved. Long, quiet days she spent, not lonely nor idle, for her little world was peopled. Peopled is poblar, was peopled, poblar, with imaginary friends, and she was by nature a busy bee. There were 6 dolls to be taken up and dressed every morning, for Beth was a child still and loved her pets as well as ever. Not one whole or handsome one among them. All were outcasts till Beth took them in, for when her sisters outgrew these idols, they passed to her because Amy would have nothing old or ugly. Beth cherished them all the more tenderly for that very reason, and set up a hospital for infirm dolls. No pins were ever stuck into their cotton vitals. No harsh words or blows were ever given them. No neglect ever saddened the heart of the most repulsive, but all were fed and clothed, nursed and cursed with an affection which never failed. One forlorn fragment of dollanity had belonged to Joe, and having led a tempestuous life, was left a wreck in the rag bag, from which dreary poorhouse it was rescued by Beth and taken to her refuge. Having no top to its head, she tied on a neat little cap, and as both arms and legs were gone, she hid these deficiencies by folding it in a blanket and devoting her best bed to this chronic invalid. If anyone had known the care lavished on that dolly, I think it would have touched their hearts, even while they laughed or laughed. Remember, British accent, laughed. American accent, laughed. She brought it bits of bouquets. She read to it, took it out to breathe fresh air, hidden under her coat. She sang it lullabies and never went to be without kissing its dirty face and whispering tenderly, "I hope you'll have a good night, my poor dear." Beth had her troubles as well as the others, and not being an angel but a very human little girl, she often wept a little weep, as Joe said, because she couldn't take music lessons and have a fine piano. She loved music so dearly, tried so hard to learn and practice away so patiently as the jingling old instrument, that it did seem as if someone not to hint Aunt March ought to help her. Nobody did, however, and nobody saw. Beth wiped the tears of the yellow keys that wouldn't keep in tune when she was all alone. She sang like a little lark about her work, never was too tired for Marmee and the girls, and day after day said hopefully to herself, "I know I'll get my music sometime, if I'm good." There are many Beths in the world, shy and quiet, sitting in corners till needed, and living for others so cheerfully that no one sees the sacrifices till the little cricket on the hearth stops chirping. This hearth is not the earth. This hearth is, remember, is this platform usually close to the fire, which means the home, you know. I guess it's a metaphor for being at home. On the hearth it stops chirping, and the sweet, sunshiny presence vanishes, leaving silence and shadow behind. Beautiful way Louisa May Alcott is honor here all these characters that are like Beth, doing a work that nobody see, and they don't even see them. If anybody had asked Amy what the greatest trial of her life was, she would have answered at once, "My nose." When she was a baby, Joe had accidentally dropped her into the coal hole, and Amy insisted that the fall had ruined her nose forever. It was not big nor red like poor Petrus. It was only rather flat. It was only rather flat, and all the pinching in the world could not give it an aristocratic point. No one minded it but herself, and it was doing its best to row, but Amy felt deeply the want of a Grecian nose, and drew whole sheets of handsome ones to console herself. Little Raphael, as her sisters called her, had a decided talent for drawing, and was never so happy as when copying flowers, designing fairies, or illustrating stories with queer specimens of art. Her teachers complained that instead of doing her sums, she covered her slate with animals. The blank pages of her atlas were used to copy maps on, and caricatures of the most ludicrous description came fluttering out of all her books at unlucky moments. She got through her lessons as well as she could, and managed to escape reprimands by being a model of deportment. She was a great favorite with her mates, being good-tempered and possessing the happy art of pleasing without effort. Her little airs and graces were much admired, so were her accomplishments, for besides her drawing, she could play 12 tunes, crochet, and read French without mispronouncing more than 2/3 of them words. She had a plaintive way of saying, when Papa was rich, we did so and so, which was very touching, and her long words were considered perfectly elegant by the girls. Amy was in a fair way to be spoiled, for everyone petted her, and her small vanities and selfishness were growing nicely. One thing, however, rather quenched the vanities. She had to wear her cousin's clothes. Now Florence's mamma hadn't a particle of taste, and Amy suffered deeply at having to wear a red instead of a blue bonnet, and becoming gowns and fussy aprons that did not fit. Everything was good, well-made, and little worn, but Amy's artistic eyes were much afflicted, especially this winter, when her school dress was a dull purple with yellow dots and no trimming. My only comfort, she said to Meg, with tears in her eyes, is that Mother doesn't take tags in my dresses whenever I'm naughty, as Maria Park's mother does. My dear, it's really dreadful, for sometimes she's so bad, her frock is up to her knees, and she can't come to school. When I think of this degradation, and that's a word that she made up, I feel that I can bear even my flat nose and purple gown with yellow skyrockets on it. Meg was Amy's confidence and monitor, and by some strange attraction of opposites, Jo was gentle Beth's. To Jo alone did the shy child tell her thoughts, and over her big harum-scarum sister, Beth unconsciously exercised more influence than anyone in the family. The two older girls were a great deal to one another, but each took one of the younger sisters into her keeping and watched over her in her own way, playing mother, they called it, and put their sisters in the place of discarded dolls with the maternal instincts of Little Women. Excuse me. Has anybody got anything to tell? It's been such a dismal day. I'm really dying for some amusement, said Meg, as they sat sewing together that evening. I had a queer time with Aunt today, and as I got the best of it, I'll tell you about it, began Jo, who dearly loved to tell stories. I was reading that everlasting Balshan. Everlasting es como infinito Balshan, ¿no? That nunca acaba. You know, the pictures, I probably play some over here, and running away, as I always do for Anne's, soon drops off, and then I take out some nice book and read like fury till she wakes up. I actually made myself sleepy, and before she began to nod, I gave such a gape that she asked me what I meant by opening my mouth wide enough to take the whole book in at once. I wish I could and be done with it, said. I tried not to be saucy. Then she gave me a long lecture on my sins and told me to sit and think them over while she just lost herself for a moment. She never finds herself very soon, so the minute her cap began to bob like a top-heavy dahlia, I whipped the Vicar of Wakefield out of my pocket and read away. And I will place also over here the picture of that novel, with one eye on him and one on Anne. I just got to where they all tumbled into the water when I forgot and laughed out loud. Anne woke up and, being more good-natured after her nap, told me to read a bit and show what frivolous work I preferred to the worthy and instructive Belsham. I did my very best, and she liked it, though she only said, I don't understand what it's all about. Go back and begin it, child. Back I went and made the primroses as interesting as ever I could. Once I was wicked enough to stop in a thrilling place and say meekly, I'm afraid it tires you, ma'am. Shan't I stop now? She caught up her knitting, which had dropped out of her hands, gave me a sharp look through her specs, and said in her short way, finish the chapter and don't be impertinent, miss. Did she own she liked it? Asked Meg. Oh, bless you, no. But she let old Belsham rest, and when I ran back after my gloves, and this is the word that I was trying to explain before, gloves, this afternoon, there she was, so hard at the Vicar that she didn't hear me laugh as I danced a jig in the hall because of the good time coming. What a pleasant life she might have if only she chose. I don't envy her much. I don't envy her much in spite of her money, for after all, rich people have about as many worries as poor ones, I think, added Joe. That reminds me, said Meg, that I've got something to tell. It isn't funny like Joe's story, but I thought about it a good deal as I came home. At the King's today, I found everybody in a flurry, and one of the children said that her oldest brother had done something dreadful, and Papa had sent him away. I heard Mrs. King crying and Mr. King talking very loud, and Grace and Ellen turned away their faces when they passed me so I shouldn't see how red and swollen their eyes were. I didn't ask any question, of course, but I felt so sorry for them and was rather glad I hadn't any wild brothers to do wicked things and disgrace the family. I think being disgraced in school is a great deal trying. And remember, this is again a new word that she's inventing. She's not saying it properly. Than anything bad boys can do, said Amy, shaking her head as if her experience of life had been a deep one. Susie Perkins came to school today with a lovely red carnelian ring. I wanted it dreadfully and wished I was her with all my might. Well, she drew a picture of Mr. Davis with a monstrous nose and hump, and the words, John ladies, my eye is upon you, coming out of his mouth in a balloon thing. And remember, this is now in the novel, is someone else that draw this picture, but in actually the movie, in 1994 movie, is Amy who is drawing it. And maybe it appears later that she's going to be also in this kind of situation. But now she's talking about someone else drawing Mr. Davis. young ladies, and so I already said the balloon is the typical from a comic, okay? We were laughing over it when all of a sudden his eye was on us and he ordered Susie to bring up her slate. She was paralyzed, and again, something that she's pronouncing wrong, with fright, but she went and, oh, what do you think he did? He took her by the ear. Just fancy how horrid, and led her to the recitation platform and made her stand there half an hour, holding the slate so everyone could see. Didn't the girls laugh? Or laugh, remember? At the picture, asked Joe, who released the scrape. Laugh? Not one. They sat still as mice, and Susie cried quarts. I know she did. I didn't envy her then, for I felt that millions of carnelian's rings wouldn't have made me happy after that. I never should have got over such an agonizing mortification. And Amy went on with her work in the proud consciousness of virtue and the successful utterance of 2 long words in a breath. I saw something I liked this morning, and I meant to tell it at dinner, but I forgot, said Beth, putting Joe's topsy-turvy basket in order as she talked. When I went to get some oysters for Hannah, Mr. Lawrence, the neighbor, was in the fish shop, but he didn't see me, for I kept behind the fish barrel, and he was busy with Mr. Cutter, the fishman. A poor woman came in with a pail of a map and asked Mr. Probably with a pail and a mop, and asked Mr. Cutter if he would let her do some scrubbing, so cleaning the place, for a bit of fish, because she hadn't any dinner for her children, and he had been disappointed of a day's work. Mr. Cutter was in a hurry and said no, rather crossly, so she was going away, looking hungry and sorry, when Mr. Lawrence hooked up a big fish with the crooked end of his cane and held it out to her. She was so glad and surprised, she took it right into her arms and thanked him over and over. He told her to go along and cook it, and she hurried off so happy. Wasn't it good of him? Oh, she did look so funny, hugging the big slippery fish and hoping Mr. Lawrence's bed in heaven would be icy instead of easy. No, so it's another, probably because maybe the woman is an Irish woman living in America, and this is probably why the reference of this word is probably easy, but it's spelled as icy because of the accent. When they had laughed at Beth's story, they asked their mother for one. And after a moment's thought, she said soberly, as I sat cutting out blue flannel jackets today at the rooms, I felt very anxious about Father, and thought how lonely and helpless we should be if anything happened to him. It was not a wise thing to do, but I kept on worrying, till an old man came in with an order for some clothes. He sat down near me, and I began to talk to him, for he looked poor and tired and anxious. Have you sons in the army? I asked, for the note he brought was not to me. Yes, ma'am, I had 4, but 2 were killed. One is a prisoner, and I'm going to the other, who is very sick in a Washington hospital. He answered quietly. You have done a great deal for your country, sir, I said, feeling respect now instead of pity. Not a mite more than I ought, ma'am. I'd go myself if I was any use. As I ain't, I give my boys and give them free. He spoke so cheerfully, looked so sincere, and seemed so glad to give his all, that I was ashamed of myself. I'd given one man and thought it too much, while he gave 4 without grudging them. I had all my girls to comfort me at home, and his last son was waiting miles away to say goodbye to him, perhaps. I felt so rich, so happy thinking of my blessings that I made him a nice bundle. Again, bundle. This is a key word for this chapter. Another is similar to burdens, okay? But this bundle is a present, it's like a package made with clothes, with a kind of fabric, maybe a shawl, okay? And actually you can see this in 2019 movie. It appears this scene, very nice scene, where she is even including something that she's a scarf, I think, that she owns. So that's nice. That I made him a nice bundle, gave him some money, and thanked him heartily for the lesson he had taught me. Tell another story, mother, one with a moral to it, like this. I like to think about them afterward. If they are real and not too preachy, said Joe after a minute's silence. Mrs. March smiled and began at once, for she had told stories to this little audience for many years and knew how to please them. Once upon a time, there were 4 girls who had enough to eat and drink and wear, a good many comforts and pleasures, kind friends and parents who loved them dearly, and yet they were not contented. Here the listeners stole sly looks at one another and began to sue diligently. Those girls were anxious to be good and made many excellent resolutions. So resolutions, remember, is the things that you, for example, in the New Year's, you made resolutions. So you commit yourself to do something new, no? But they did not keep them. It's like promises, but they did not keep them very well and were constantly saying, if only we had this, or if we could only do that, quite forgetting how much they already had and how many things they actually could do. So they asked an old woman what spell they could use to make them happy, and she said, when you feel discontented, think over your blessings and be grateful. Here Jo looked up quickly, as if about to speak, but changed her mind, seeing that the story was not done yet. Being sensible girls, they decided to try her advice and soon were surprised to see how well off they were. One discovered that money couldn't keep shame and sorrow out of rich people's houses. Another that though she was poor, she was a great deal happier with her youth, health, and good spirits than a certain fretful, feeble old lady who couldn't enjoy her comforts. A third that, disagreeable as it was to help get dinner, it was harder still to go begging for it. And the fourth, that even carnelian rings were not so valuable as good behavior. So they agreed to stop complaining, to enjoy the blessings already possessed, and try to deserve them, lest they should be taken away entirely. Instead of increased, and I believe they were never disappointed or sorry that they look the old woman's advice. Now, Marmee, that is very cunning of you to turn our own stories against us and give us a sermon instead of a romance, cried Meg. I like that kind of sermon. It's the sort Father used to tell us, said Beth thoughtfully, putting the needles straight on Joe's cushions. I don't complain near as much as the others do, and I shall be more careful than ever now, for I've had warning from Susie's downfall, said Amy morally. We needed that lesson, and we won't forget it. If we do so, you just say to us, as old Chloe did in Uncle Tom, another story that I'm going to place because it's another reference they had. Think of your mercies, children. Think of your mercies. Because como think of your mercies, right? Added Joe, who could not, for the life of her, help getting a morsel a morsel of fun out of the little sermon, though she took it to heart as much as any of them. Until here, this is the end of chapter 4. It has been long, but I hope you have enjoyed and learned many expressions and many references throughout the reading. See you soon. Bye for now.